Hey everyone, this is Dr. Sean, and in today's lesson we'll be discussing part 2 of the Ponziani when they don't take the poison pawn and they capture the other pawn. So the moves go as follows: e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and c3. So when our opponent plays knight f6 to go after our poisonous pawn, obviously we let them have it. We move a pawn once. The idea is to move the other one twice. Now, we know what to do from last lesson, what happens when they take our undefended pawn or our poisonous pawn. We always win with a push. Now, sometimes you have a chess player or opponent that like, you know what? That might be a trap. I'm not sure. I don't want to take a chance. Let me play a little bit safe and let me go ahead and capture the other pawn or the non-poisonous pawn. So let's say your opponent captures, guys, the other pawn. Same thing as the poison pawn variation. You always win with a pawn push. So what we're going to do, instead of recapturing the pawn, we're going to win with this deadly pawn push. Now, Black has a few options in response to that pawn push. Obviously, their knight on f6 is in trouble. It can go knight e4. That's a move. They can play knight d5. That's a move. Or they can go knight g4. So pretty much those are Black's three most common responses to that pawn push. Now, if you're wondering, can Black go back? Obviously, but it's less likely. Can Black put the knight on the rim? Well, they can, but knight on the rim is dim, as we learned from last lesson, because we launch a pawn, and no matter where the knight goes, it's pretty much trapped, and we'll be up 3 points. So I'll discuss what to do when the knight goes to e4, g4, and knight d5. So let's look over the first one. Let's say Black plays knight e4. Now, normally when the knight's in the middle, our queen comes out to play. So what we're going to do is play queen e2. Now, if you're curious why that's the best move when the knight's in the middle as opposed to bishop d3, is because let's say, for example, we play bishop d3. Our opponent can play knight c5, and it's kind of like, you know, that's a bad knight. We have a good bishop. We obviously don't want to lose our good bishop for the bad knight. So how about, instead of worrying about that, let's play queen e2, because now, once our opponent moves, we're out of arm's reach, out of the knight's line of fire. Now, how do we know they're going to put the knight to c5? Some people might say, hey, Coach Sean, how about they play pawn d5? That protects the knight. Well, not really, en passant, and their knight's in trouble. Oh, what happens if they play pawn f5? Same idea, en passant, and their knight's in trouble. So they really have to play, even though they don't like it, they might waste even time or tempo, knight c5. Now, in this position, obviously, after our opponent wastes the move or tempo, we're going to connect our tame. Now, the knight's going to move to a6. The reason we know this is because if they opt to go knight here to e6, we simply win with a pawn push. And if this happens, capture, capture, and after moving the queen to e4, I take this position all day long as white. We have two central pawns, a queen, their knight's going to waste the tempo. I don't even know where they're going to go after, queen e4. This is extremely deadly for white. So what they're going to do in this position is play knight a6. Now, normally, when they have a knight on the rim, a lot of people say, hey, Dr. Sean, don't you just launch a pawn and trap the knight? Yeah, if the knight was on the rim, but closer to us. But since it's further to us, we acknowledge that the knight's misplaced, and they simply want to place it onto better squares. So what we want to do is restrict this escape route. What we're going to do is play pawn a3. Black looks at that, thinks nothing of it, is going to play bishop e7 to prepare the castle. Now, what do we do when we move a pawn once? In the Ponziani, we're going to move the other pawn twice. We're going to play, ladies and gentlemen, pawn to b4. Our plan is to play b5 in order to fork both knights. In order for Black not to receive this fork, they have to move one of their knights back. If they move their c6 knight back, you simply win with pawn b5. There's no way their knight could escape. They go to b4, goner. They go to c5, goner. Can they go back? Absolutely not. So no matter what, that knight will be ours. We'll be winning this game. Now, if they move the a knight to b8, How do we trap the c6 knight? Same idea, a pawn push, just the other pawn. Not the b pawn, because they could escape to a5, but the d5 pawn. And here is simply winning. They can go here, the knight covers, they could sacrifice, but not their best idea. They could sacrifice here, but they'll be down material. So no matter what, you'll be winning this game. So, not to go too fast, if the knight ever goes in the middle, you simply win with queen e2. Do we care about either d5 or f5? No, because all we have to do is en passant, and that knight will be hanging. If they try to escape to c5, connect your chain, and make sure you chain up on the queen side of the board, and you should be able to win with these. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, Coach Sean, not bad. Let's say the knight doesn't go in the middle. Let's say the knight goes in the corner. Well, let's take a look. Two attackers. We have one defender to our pawn. What's our best second defender? Connect our chain. Pawn takes d4, having a beautiful chain. Now, what's black gonna do? Give us a check. Very standard, very natural. Try to put our king in trouble. One step closer to castling. But what do? We block with the knight. Now, the idea for blocking with the knight is when black captures our knight, and we reconnect, we extend our pawn chain. The longer chain we have, the bigger gold we have in a chess game. Now, if black castles, here's where we gain our tempo. We're not going to break our chain, but what we're going to do is play pawn h3, because we want to kick this knight over here on the rim. Now, if it was closer, do we win with a launching of a pawn because it's dim? Absolutely. But if it's further, we don't have this launching of a pawn, but instead what we can do is create a weakness. Weakness created, doubling of the pawns, plus their king is open. Now, leave the structure alone, and what we're going to do is play bishop d3. Now, what's our plan? One attacker on their weakest pawn closest to their king. Now, if they make a subtle move, let's say they move their pawn to d5. What's their plan? If we have one attacker and they have one defender, add another attacker. And there's no way they could protect that pawn. If they move their king, we pick up a free pawn. And if they try to go after our bishop, we're like, hold on, I'm up a pawn. When we're winning, we want to simplify or trade. So let's put our bishop right here. And let's trade off the bishops and win this game. Are we winning? Absolutely. We're up a pawn, so we're up in points. Are we winning positionally? Absolutely. I mean, we have an extended pawn chain. Our queen is deadly. Our knight's on a happy square. We're preparing the castle. Does black have anything going on? Absolutely not. Their knight's stuck. Their queen definitely cannot come out on this diagonal. This is useless. This is bad. This is bad. This is horrible. Their rooks in the back can't do nothing. So we're winning with the two P's. The points in position. So that's if their knight goes to g4. Now, their final move that their knight can go to is knight e5. Now, many people say, hey, Dr. Sean, do we connect the chain? Well, it's not a bad idea to take this pawn, but typically you want to make your opponent waste a move first prior to connecting the chain. So we need to find something on a light square that can make that knight move again. And believe it or not, it's not the bishop, it's actually the queen, because many people say, oh, Dr. Sean, bishop c4, tempo and castle, what's wrong with that? It's on a light square. Well, if they play knight b6, what they're doing is counterattacking us. We're the one who's going to waste the last move. So, what we want to play is queen b3. Because like this, when they play knight b6, we're out of arm's reach, and we're the ones forcing them to waste the tempo, wasting a move. Now, how do we continue? Now we connect the chain. What's black gonna do? Same thing like last variation. Give us a check. How do we block? Always with the knight, because typically, when the bishop captures, what we're going to do is always extend our pawn chain. Is this winning for white? Oh, I'd rather be on white's side as opposed to my opponent's side. What do we have that they don't have? Well, we have an extended pawn chain, which is gold. We have harmony with the knight, with the bishops. Our queen looks very strong. And what does black really have? Nothing. Bishop doesn't have harmony. This c6 knight is bad. This b6 knight is bad. So I'd rather be on white's side any day of the week. Now, let's rewind this once again. Doesn't matter what pawn they capture, you always win with a pawn push. But in today's lesson, when they take the non-poisonous pawn, you win with a pawn push. And keep in mind, if the knight goes in the middle, your queen comes out to play. The knight goes to g4, you connect the chain, and then you kick this knight as the game goes on. If the knight goes to d5, tempo, connect, and you'll always have a comfortable game. So it doesn't matter if they take the non-poisonous pawn, you'll always have a comfortable winning game. So anyways, that wraps it up for today's lesson. My name is Dr. Sean. If anyone's interested in supporting my channel, the link is in the description below. If anyone is interested in possible chess lessons, as well in the description below. Thank you, chess family. This is Dr. Sean. Until next time, take care.